Welcome to 2024. We strongly advise you to relax and listen to the voice. Hello everyone. Welcome back and thank you for joining us at the beginning of the new year. Happy New Year to everyone out there. Before we start in with the story, I'd like to share something special that we were given over the holidays. We were gifted a very special piece of art from one of our subscribers, I Am Mercy 2, which is based off of one of the thumbnails from one of the videos out of our Grimm's Fairy Tales collection. We'd like to thank you very much, I Am Mercy 2. We appreciate this, and we're happy to share it with the rest of our viewers. Thank you very much for gifting us this piece of art. Now buckle up, everyone. Away we go. The Dog and the Sparrow. A sheepdog had not a good master, but, on the contrary, one who let him suffer hunger. As he could stay no longer with him, he went quite sadly away. On the road he met a sparrow who said, "Brother Dog, why are you so sad?" The dog replied, "I'm hungry, and I have nothing to eat." Then said the sparrow, "Dear brother, come into the town with me, and I will satisfy your hunger." So they went into the town together, and when they came in front of the butcher's shop, the sparrow said to the dog, "Stay there, and I will pick a bit of meat down for you." And he alighted on the stall, looked about him to see that no one was observing him, and pecked and pulled and tore for so long at a piece which lay on the edge that it slipped down. Then the dog seized it, ran into a corner, and devoured it. The sparrow said, "Now come with me to another shop, and then I will get you one more piece that you may be satisfied." When the dog had devoured the second piece as well, the sparrow asked, "Brother Dog, have you now had enough?" "Yes, I've had meat enough," he answered, "but I have had no bread yet." Said the sparrow to the dog, "You shall have that also. Come with me." Then he took him to the baker's shop, and pecked at a couple of little buns till they rolled down, and as the dog wanted still more, he led him to another stall, and again got bread for him. When that was consumed, the sparrow said, "Brother Dog, have you now had enough?" "Yes," he replied. "Now we will walk a while outside the town." Then they both went out to the highway. The weather was warm, however, and when they had walked a little way, the dog said, "I'm tired, and I would like to sleep." "Well, do sleep," answered the sparrow, "and in the meantime, I will seat myself on a branch." So the dog lay down in the road, and fell fast asleep. Whilst he lay sleeping there, a wagoner came driving by who had a cart with 3 horses laden with 2 barrels of wine. The sparrow, however, saw that he was not going to turn aside, but was staying in the wheel track in which the dog was lying, so it cried out, "Wagoner, don't do it, or I will make you poor." But the wagoner growled to himself, "Oh, you will not make me poor," and he cracked his whip and drove the cart over the top of the dog, and the wheels killed him. Then the sparrow cried, "You have run over my brother Dog and killed him. It shall cost you your cart and horses." "Cart and horses indeed," said the wagoner. "What harm can you do me?" And he drove onwards. Then the sparrow crept under the cover of the cart, and he pecked so long at the same bunghole that he got the bung out, and then all the wine ran out without the driver noticing it. But once when he was looking behind him, he saw that the cart was dripping, and he looked at the barrels and saw that one of them was empty. "Unfortunate fellow that am I," cried he. "Not unfortunate enough yet," said the sparrow, and flew onto the head of one of the horses and pecked his eyes out. When the driver saw that, he drew out his axe and he wanted to hit the sparrow, but the sparrow flew into the air, and he hit his horse on the head instead, and it fell down dead. "Oh, what an unfortunate man am I!" cried he.
"Not unfortunate enough yet," said the Sparrow.
And when the driver drove on with the 2 horses, the Sparrow again crept under the cover and pecked the bung out of the second cask, so all the wine was spilt. When the driver became aware of it, he again cried, "Oh, what an unfortunate man I am!" But the Sparrow replied,
"Not unfortunate enough yet."
and he seated himself on the head of the second horse and began to peck his eyes out as well. The driver ran up to it, and he raised his axe to strike, but the Sparrow flew into the air, and the blow struck the horse, which instantly fell. "Oh, what an unfortunate man am I!"
"Not unfortunate enough yet," said the Sparrow,
and he lighted on the third horse's head and pecked out his eyes as well. The driver then, in his rage, struck at the Sparrow without looking around, and did not hit him, but killed his third horse likewise. "Oh, what an unfortunate man am I!" cried he.
"Not unfortunate enough yet," answered the Sparrow. "Now I will make you unfortunate in your home."
And then he flew away. The driver had to leave the wagon standing, and full of anger and vexation he went home. "Ah," said he to his wife, "what misfortunes I have had! My wine has run out, and the horses are all 3 dead."
"Alas, husband," she answered, "what a malicious bird has come into the house! It has gathered together every bird there is in the world, and they have fallen on our corn up there, and they are devouring it."
The man went upstairs, and he saw that thousands and thousands of birds were sitting in the loft, and they had eaten up all of the corn, and a sparrow was sitting in the midst of them all. Then the driver cried, "Oh, what an unfortunate man am I!"
"Not unfortunate enough yet," answered the Sparrow. "Wagoner, it shall cost you your life as well."
And then the Sparrow flew out of the room. Then the wagoner had lost all of his property, and he went downstairs into the room, sat down behind the stove, and was quite furious and bitter. But the Sparrow sat outside in front of the window and cried,
"Wagoner, it shall cost you your life."
Then the wagoner snatched the axe and threw it at the Sparrow, but it only broke the window, and it did not hit the bird. The Sparrow now hopped in, placed itself on the stove, and cried,
"Wagoner, it shall cost you your life."
The latter, quite mad and blind with rage, smote the stove in twain, and as the Sparrow flew from one place to another, so it fared with all of his household furniture, looking-glass, benches, table, and at last the walls of his own house, and yet he could not hit the bird. At length, however, he caught it with his hand. Then his wife said,
"Shall I kill it?"
"No," cried he, "that would be too merciful. It shall die much more cruelly." And he took the bird and he swallowed it whole. The Sparrow, however, began to flutter about in his body, and it fluttered up again into the man's mouth. Then it stretched out its head and cried,
"Wagoner, it shall still cost you your life."
The driver gave the axe to his wife and said, "Wife, kill the bird in my mouth for me." The woman struck, but missed her blow, and hit the wagoner square on his head, so that he fell dead, but the Sparrow flew up and away. Frederick and Catherine. There was once upon a time a man who was called Frederick and a woman called Catherine, who had married each other and lived together as young married folks. One day Frederick said, "I will now go and plow, Catherine. When I come back, there must be some roast meat on the table for hunger and a fresh draught for thirst."
"Just go, Frederick," answered Kate. "Just go.
I will have all ready for you."
So when dinner time drew near, she got a sausage out of the chimney, put it in the frying pan, put some butter to it, and set it on the fire. The sausage began to fry and to hiss. Catherine stood beside it and held the handle of the pan, and had her own thoughts as she was doing it. But then it occurred to her, while the sausage is getting done, you could go into the cellar and draw beer. So she set the frying pan safely on the fire, took a can, and went down into the cellar to draw beer. The beer ran into the can and Kate watched it, and then she thought,
"Oh dear, the dog upstairs is not fastened up. It might get the sausage out of the pan. Lucky I thought of it."
And in a trice she was up the cellar steps again, but the Spitz had the sausage in its mouth already, and trailed it away on the ground. But Catherine, who was not idle, set out after it, and chased it a long way into the field. The dog, however, was swifter than Catherine, and did not let the sausage go, but skipped over the furrows with it.
"What's gone is gone,"
said Kate, and turned around as she had run till she was weary. She walked quietly and comfortably and cooled herself. During this time the beer was still running out of the cask, for Kate had not turned the tap. And when the can was full, as there was no other place for it, it ran into the cellar and did not stop until the whole cask was empty. As soon as Kate was on the steps, she saw the accident.
"Good gracious," she cried. "What shall I do now to stop Frederick from finding out?"
She thought for a while, and at last she remembered that up in the garret was still standing a sack of the finest wheat flour from the last fair, and she would fetch that down and strew it over the beer.
"Yes," said she, "he who saves a thing when he ought has it afterwards when he needs it."
And she climbed up to the garret and carried the sack below, and threw it straight down on the can of beer, which she knocked over, and Frederick's draught swam also in the cellar.
"It is all right," said Kate. "Where the one is, the other ought to be also."
And she strewed the meal over the whole cellar. When it was done, she was heartily delighted with her work, and said,
"How clean and wholesome it does look here."
At midday, home came Frederick. "Now, wife, what have you ready for me?"
"Ah, Freddy," she answered, "I was frying a sausage for you, but whilst I was drawing the beer to drink with it, the dog took it away out of the pan, and whilst I was running after the dog, all the beer ran out, and whilst I was drying up the beer with the flour, I knocked over the can as well. But be easy, the cellar is quite dry again."
Said Frederick, Kate, you should not have done that. To let the sausage be carried off and the beer run out of the cask, and throw out all the flour into the bargain."
"Well, Frederick, I did not know that. You should have told me."
The man thought, if this is the kind of wife I have, I'd better take more care of things. Now he had saved up a good number of tailors, which he changed into gold, and said to Catherine, "Look, these are yellow counters for playing games. I will put them in a pot and bury them in the stable under the cow's manger, but mind you, keep away from them, or it will be the worse for you." Said she,
"Oh no, Frederick, I certainly will not go near them."
And when Frederick was gone, some peddlers came into the village who had cheap earthen bowls and pots, and they asked the young woman if there was nothing she wanted to bargain with them for.
"Oh, dear people," said Catherine, "I have no money and can buy nothing, but if you have any use for yellow counters, I will buy of you."
Yellow counters? Why not? But just let us see them."
"Then go into the stable and dig under the cow's manger, and you will find the yellow counters. I'm not allowed to go in there."
The rogues went thither, dug and found pure gold. Then they laid hold of it, ran away, and left their pots and bowls behind in the house. Catherine thought she must use her new things, and as she had no lack in the kitchen already without these, she knocked the bottom out of every pot, and set them all as ornaments on the paling which went round about the house. When Frederick came and saw the new decorations, he said, "Catherine, what have you been about?"
"Oh, I have bought them, Frederick, from the counters which were under the cow's manger. I did not go there myself. I had the peddlers dig them out for themselves."
"Oh, wife," said Frederick, "what have you done? Those were not counters, but pure gold and all of our wealth. You should not have done that."
"Indeed, Frederick," said she, "I did not know that. You should have forewarned me."
Catherine stood for a while and wondered. Then she said,
"Listen, Frederick, we will soon go get the gold back again. We will run after the thieves."
"Come then," said Frederick. "We will try it, but take with you some butter and cheese that we may have something to eat on the way."
"Yes, Frederick, I will take them."
They set out, and as Frederick was the better walker, Catherine followed him.
"It is to my advantage,"
Thought she.
"When we turn back, I shall be a little way in advance."
Then she came to a hill where there were deep ruts on both sides of the road.
"There one can see," said Catherine, "how they have torn and skinned and gobbed the poor earth. It will never be whole again as long as it lives."
And in her heart's compassion, she took her butter and smeared the ruts right and left, that they may not be so hurt by the wheels. And as she was thus bending down in her charity, one of the cheeses rolled out of her pocket down the hill. Said Catherine,
"I have made my way once up here. I will not go down again. Another may run and fetch it back."
So she took another cheese and rolled it down, but the cheeses did not come back. So she let a third run down, thinking,
"Perhaps they are waiting for company and do not like to walk alone."
As all three stayed away, she said,
"I do not know what any of that can mean, but it may perhaps be that the third has not found the way and has gone wrong. I will just send the fourth to call it."
But the fourth did no better than the third. Then Catherine was angry. She threw down the fifth and sixth as well, and these were her last. She remained standing for some time watching for their coming, but when they still did not come, she said,
"Oh, you are good folks to send in search of death. You stay a fine long time away. Do you think I will wait any longer for you? I shall go my way, and you may run after me. You have longer legs than I."
Catherine went on and found Frederick, who was standing waiting for her because he wanted something to eat. "Now, just let us have what you've brought with you," said he. She gave him the dry bread. "Where have you the butter and the cheeses?" asked the man.
"Ah, Freddie," said Catherine, "I smeared the cart ruts with the butter, and the cheeses will come soon. One ran away from me, so I sent the others after to collect it."
Said Frederick, "You should not have done that, Catherine, to smear the butter on the road and let the cheeses run down the hill."
"Really, Frederick, you should have told me."
Then they ate dry bread together, and Frederick said, "Catherine, did you make the house safe when you came away?"
"No, Frederick, you should have told me to do it before."
"Then go home again and make the house safe before we go any further, and bring with you something else to eat when you return. I will wait here for you." Catherine went back and thought,
"Frederick wants something more to eat. He does not like butter and cheese, so I will take with me a handkerchief full of dried pears and a pitcher of vinegar for him to drink."
Then she bolted the upper half of the door fast, but unhinged the lower door and took it on her back, believing that when she had placed the door in security, the house must be well taken care of. Catherine took her time on the way and thought,
"Frederick will rest himself so much the longer."
When she had once reached him, she said,
"Here is the house door for you, Frederick, and now you can take care of the house yourself."
"Oh, heavens," said he, What a wise wife I have! She takes the under door off the hinges that everything may run in and bolts the upper one. It is now too late to go back home again, but since you have brought the door here, you shall just carry it farther."
"I will carry the door, Frederick, but the dried pears and the vinegar jug will be too heavy for me. I will hang them on the door. It may carry them."
And now they went into the forest, and they sought the rogues, but they did not find them. At length, as it grew dark, they climbed into a tree and resolved to spend the night there. Scarcely, however, had they sat down at the top of it, than the rascals came thither, who carry away with them what does not want to go, and find things before they are lost. They sat down under the very tree in which Frederick and Catherine were sitting, lighted a fire, and were about to share their booty. Frederick got down on the other side and collected some stones together. Then he climbed up again with them, and wished to throw them at the thieves and kill them. The stones, however, did not hit them, and the knaves cried,
"It will soon be morning, and the wind is shaking down the fir cones."
Catherine still had the door on her back, and as it pressed so heavily on her, she thought it was the fault of the dried pears, and said,
"Frederick, I must throw the pears down."
"No, Catherine, not now," he replied. "They might betray us."
"Oh, but Frederick, I must. They weigh me down far too much."
"Do it then, and be hanged."
Then the dried pears rolled down between the branches, and the rascals below said,
"Those are birds' droppings."
A short time afterwards, as the door was still heavy, Catherine said,
"Ah, Frederick, I must pour out the vinegar."
"No, Catherine, you must not. That may betray us as well."
"Oh, but Frederick, I must. It weighs me down far too much."
"Fine, woman, then do it, and risk being hanged."
Catherine emptied out the vinegar, and it spattered over the robbers. They whispered among themselves,
"Oh, the dew is already starting to fall."
At length, Catherine thought,
"Can it really be the door which weighs me down so?"
and said,
"Frederick, I must throw the door down."
"No, not now, Catherine. It may betray us."
"Oh, but Frederick, I must. It weighs me down far too much."
"Please, Catherine, no. Do hold it fast."
"Oh, Frederick, I'm letting it fall."
"Let it go then in the devil's name."
At once the door fell down with a violent clatter, and the rascals below cried,
"The devil is coming down the tree!"
and they ran away and left everything behind them. Early the next morning, when the two came down, they found all their gold again, and they carried it home. When they were once more at home, Frederick said,
"And now, Catherine, you too must be industrious in work."
"Yes, Frederick, I will soon do that. I will go into the field and cut corn."
When Catherine got into the field, she said to herself,
"Shall I eat before I cut, or shall I sleep before I cut? Oh, I will eat first."
Then Catherine ate, and eating made her sleepy, and she began to cut, and half in a dream she cut all of her clothes to pieces, her apron, her gown, and her shift. When Catherine awoke again, after a long sleep, she was standing there half naked, and said to herself,
"Is it I, or is it not I? Alas, it is not I."
In the meantime, night came, and Catherine ran into the village, knocked at her husband's window, and cried,
"Frederick, I should very much like to know if Catherine is in."
"Yes, yes," replied Frederick. "She must be in and asleep." Said she,
"That's all right. Then I am certainly at home already."
and she ran away. Outside, Catherine found some vagabonds who were going to steal. Then she went to them and said,
"I will help you to steal."
The rascals thought that she knew what opportunities the place offered, and were willing to take her along. Catherine went in front of the houses and cried,
"Good folks, have you anything? We want to steal."
The thieves thought to themselves,
That's a fine way of doing things.
and they wished themselves once more rid of Catherine. They then said to her,
Outside the village, the pastor has some turnips in his field. Go there and pull up some turnips for us.
Catherine went to the ground and began to pull them up, but she was so lazy that she never stood up straight. Then a man came by, saw her, and stood still, and thought that it was the devil who was thus rooting amongst the turnips. He ran away into the village to the pastor and said,
"Mr. Pastor, the devil is in your turnip ground rooting up turnips."
Oh, heavens, answered the pastor. I have a lame foot. I cannot go out and drive him away.
Said the man,
"Then I will carry you on my back."
and he carried him out on his back. And when they came to the ground, Catherine arose and stood up her full height.
Ah, the devil,
cried the pastor, and both men hurried away. And in his great fright, the pastor could run better with his lame foot than the man who had carried him on his back could do on both of his sound legs. The Little Peasant. There was a certain village wherein no one lived but really rich peasants, and just one poor one, whom they called the Little Peasant. He had not even so much as a cow, and still less money to buy one, and yet he and his wife did so wish to have one. One day he said to her,
Listen, I have a good idea. There is our gossip, the carpenter. He shall make us a wooden calf and paint it brown so that it looks like any other, and in time it will certainly get big and be a cow.
The woman also liked the idea, and their gossip the carpenter cut and planed the calf, and painted it as it ought to be, and made it with its head hanging down as if it were eating. The next morning when the cows were being driven out, the little peasant called the cowherd and said,
Look, I have a little calf there, but it is still small and has to be carried.
The cowherd said,
Well, all right.
He took it in his arms and carried it to the pasture and set it among the grass. The little calf always remained standing like one which was eating, and the cowherd said,
It will soon run by itself. Just look how it eats already.
At night, when he was going to drive the herd home again, he said to the calf,
If you can stand there and eat your fill, you can also go on your own 4 legs. I don't care to drag you home again in my arms.
But the little peasant stood at his door and waited for his little calf, and when the cowherd drove the cows through the village and the calf was missing, he inquired where it was. The cowherd answered,
It's still standing out there eating. It wouldn't stop and come with us.
But the little peasant said,
"Oh, but I must have my beast back again."
Then they went back to the meadow together, but someone had stolen the calf, and it was gone. The cowherd said,
Well, it must have run away.
The peasant, however, said,
"Don't tell me that."
and he led the cowherd before the mayor, who, for his carelessness, condemned him to give the peasant a cow for the calf which had run away. And now the little peasant and his wife had the cow for which they had so long wished, and they were heartily glad, but they had no food for it, and they could give it nothing to eat, so it soon had to be killed. They salted the flesh, and the peasant went into the town and wanted to sell the skin there, so that he might buy a new calf with the proceeds. On the way he passed by a mill, and there sat a raven with broken wings, and out of pity he took him and he wrapped him in the skin. But the weather grew so bad, and there was a storm of rain and wind, that he could go no further, and he turned back to the mill and begged for shelter. The miller's wife was alone in the house, and said to the peasant,
Lay yourself on the straw there, and give him a slice of bread and cheese."
The peasant ate it and lay down with his skin beside him, and the woman thought,
"He is tired, and he has gone to sleep already."
In the meantime, in came the parson. The miller's wife received him well and said,
"My husband is out, so we will have a feast."
The peasant listened, and when he heard them talk about feasting, he was vexed that he had been forced to make shift with a slice of bread and cheese. Then the woman served up 4 different things: roast meat, salad, cakes, and wine. Just as they were about to sit down and eat, there was a knocking outside. The woman said,
"Oh heavens, it's my husband."
She quickly hid the roast meat inside the tiled stove, the wine under the pillow, the salad on the bed, and the cakes under it, and then hid the parson in the closet on the porch. Then she opened the door for her husband and said,
"Thank heaven you are back again. There's such a storm, it looks as if the world were coming to an end."
The miller saw the peasant lying on the straw and asked,
"What is that fellow doing there?"
"Ah," said the wife, "the poor knave came in the storm and rain and begged for shelter, so I gave him a bit of bread and cheese, and I showed him where the straw was."
The man said,
"Well, I have no objections, but be quick and get me something to eat."
The woman said,
"But I have nothing but bread and cheese."
"Well, at this point, I'm contented with anything," replied the husband. "So far as I am concerned, bread and cheese will do."
And he looked at the peasant and said,
"Come and eat some more with me."
The peasant did not require to be invited twice, but got up and ate. After this, the miller saw the skin in which the raven was lying on the ground, and asked,
"What have you there?"
The peasant answered,
"I have a soothsayer inside it."
"Can he foretell anything to me?" said the miller.
"Why not?" answered the peasant. "But he only says 4 things, and the 5th he keeps to himself."
The miller was curious and said,
"Let him foretell something for once."
Then the peasant pinched the raven's head so that he croaked and made a noise like
"Grrr, grrr."
The miller said,
"What did he say?"
The peasant answered,
"In the first place, he says that there is some wine hidden under the pillow."
"Bless me!"
cried the miller, and he went there and he found the wine.
"Now go on,"
said he. The peasant made the raven croak again and said,
"In the second place, he says that there is some roast meat in the tiled stove."
"Upon my word!"
cried the miller, and went thither, and he found the roast. The peasant made the raven prophesy still more, and said,
"Thirdly, he says that there is some salad on the bed."
"Oh, that will be a fine thing,"
cried the miller, and he went there and he found the salad. At last the peasant pinched the raven once more till he croaked, and said,
"Fourthly, he says that there are some cakes under the bed."
"Oh, that would be a fine thing,"
cried the miller, and he looked there, and lo and behold, he found the cakes. And now the 2 sat down to the table together, but the miller's wife was frightened to death, and went to bed and took all the keys with her. The miller would have liked much to know the 5th, but the little peasant said,
"First, we will quickly eat the 4 things, for the 5th is something bad."
So they ate, and after that they bargained how much the miller was to give for the 5th prophecy, until they agreed on 300 thalers. Then the peasant once more pinched the raven's head until he croaked loudly. The miller asked,
"Well, what did he say?"
The peasant replied,
"He says that the devil is hiding outside there in the closet on the porch."
The miller said,
"The devil must go out,"
and he opened the house door. Then the woman was forced to give up the keys, and the peasant unlocked the closet. The parson ran out as fast as he could, and the miller said,
"It was true. I saw the black rascal with my own eyes."
The peasant, however, made off the next morning by daybreak with the 300 thalers. At home, the small peasant gradually launched out. He built a beautiful house, and the peasant said,
The small peasant has certainly been to a place where golden snow falls, and people carry the gold home in shovels."
Then the small peasant was brought before the mayor, and bidden to say from whence his wealth came. He answered,
"I sold my cow's skin in the town for 300 tailors.
When the peasants heard that, they too wished to enjoy this great profit. They ran home, killed all of their cows, and stripped off their skins in order to sell them in the town to their greatest advantage. The mayor, however, said, "But my servant must go first." When she came to the merchant in the town, he did not give her more than 2 tailors for a skin, and when the others came, he did not give them so much, and said, "What can I do with all these skins?" Then the peasants were vexed that the small peasant should have thus outwitted them, wanted to take vengeance on him, and accused him of this treachery before the mayor. The innocent little peasant was unanimously sentenced to death, and was to be rolled into the water in a barrel pierced full of holes. He was led forth, and a priest was brought who was the same ass for his soul. The others were all obliged to retire to a distance, and when the peasant looked at the priest, he recognized the man who had been with the miller's wife. He said to him,
"I set you free from the closet. You set me free from this barrel."
At this same moment up came, with a flock of sheep, the very shepherd whom the peasant knew had long been wishing to be the mayor, so he cried with all of his might,
"No, I will not do it. If the whole world insists on it, I will not do it."
The shepherd, hearing that, came up to him and asked,
"What are you on about? What is it that you will not do?"
The peasant said,
"They want to make me mayor if I will put myself in the barrel, but I will not do it."
The shepherd said,
"If nothing more than that is needful in order to be mayor, I would get in the barrel at once."
The peasant said,
"If you will get in, you will be mayor."
The shepherd was willing and got in, and the peasant shut the top down on him. Then he took the shepherd's flock for himself and drove it away. The parson went to the crowd and declared that the mass had been said. Then they came and rolled the barrel towards the water. When the barrel began to roll, the shepherd cried,
"I am willing to be mayor."
They believed no otherwise than that it was the peasant who was saying this, and answered, "That's what we intend, but first you shall look about you a little down below there." And they rolled the barrel down into the water. After that the peasants went home, and as they were entering the village, the small peasant also came quietly in, driving a flock of sheep and looking quite contented. Then the peasants were astonished and said,
"Peasant, from whence do you come? Have you come out of the water?" "Yes, truly," replied the peasant. "I sank deep, deep down until at last I got to the bottom. I pushed the bottom out of the barrel and I crept out, and there were pretty meadows on which a number of lambs were feeding, and from thence I brought this flock away with me."
Said the peasants,
"Are there any more?"
"Oh, yes," said he, "more than I could want."
Then the peasants made up their minds that they too would fetch some of the sheep for themselves, at least a flock apiece. But the mayor said, "I come first." So they went to the water together, and just then there were some of the small fleecy clouds in the blue sky, which are called little lambs, and they were reflected on the water, whereupon the peasants cried,
"We already see the sheep down below."
The mayor pressed forward and said, "I will go down first, and look about me, and if things promise, well, I'll call you." So he jumped in. Splash went the water. It sounded as if he were calling them, and the whole crowd plunged in after him as one man. Then the entire village was dead, and the small peasant, as sole heir, became a rich man. Jorinda and Joringel. There was once an old castle in the midst of a large and dense forest, and in it an old woman who was a witch dwelt all alone. In the daytime she changed herself into a car or a screech owl, but in the evening she took her proper shape again as a human being. She could lure wild beasts and birds to her, and then she killed and boiled and roasted them. If anyone came within 100 paces of the castle, he was obliged to stand still, and could not stir from the place until she bade him to be free. But whenever an innocent maiden came within this circle, she changed her into a bird, and shut her up in a wicker work cage, and carried the cage into a room in the castle. She had about 7,000 cages of rare birds in the castle. Now, there was once a maiden who was called Jorinda, who was fairer than all the other girls. She and a handsome youth named Joringel had promised to marry each other. They were still in the days of betrothal, and their greatest happiness was being together. One day, in order that they might be able to talk together in peace, they went for a walk in the forest.
"Take care," said Joringel, "that you do not go too near the castle."
It was a beautiful evening. The sun shone brightly between the trunks of the trees and into the dark green of the forest, and the turtle doves sang mournfully upon the beech trees. Jorinda wept now and then. She sat down in the sunshine and was sorrowful. Joringel was sorrowful too. They were as sad as if they were about to die. And then they looked around them, and they were quite at a loss, for they did not know by which way they should go home. The sun was still half above the mountain and half under. Joringel looked through the bushes and saw the old walls of the castle close at hand. He was horror-stricken and filled with deadly fear. Jorinda was singing, "My little bird with the necklace red sings sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. He sings that the dove must soon be dead. Sings sorrow, sorrow, jug, jug, jug." Joringel looked for Jorinda. She was changed into a nightingale and sang, "Jug, jug, jug." A screech owl with glowing eyes flew 3 times around her, and 3 times cried, "To-hoo! To-hoo! To-hoo!" Joringel could not move. He stood there like a stone, and could neither weep nor speak, nor move hand or foot. The sun had now set. The owl flew into the thicket, and directly afterwards there came out of it a crooked old woman, yellow and lean, with large red eyes and a hooked nose, the point of which reached to her chin. She muttered to herself, caught the nightingale, and took it away in her hand. Joringel could neither speak nor move from the spot. The nightingale was gone. At last, the woman came back and said in a hollow voice, "Greet you, Zachiel. If the moon shines on the cage, Zachiel, let him loose at once." Then Joringel was freed. He fell on his knees before the woman and begged that she would give him back his Jorinda, but she said that he would never have her again, and she went away. He called at her, he wept, he lamented, but all in vain.
What is to become of me?"
Joringel went away and at last came to a strange village where he kept sheep for a long time. He often walked round and round the castle, but not too near to it. At last he dreamt one night that he had found a blood-red flower, in the middle of which was a beautiful large pearl. He picked the flower and went with it to the castle, and that everything he touched with the flower was freed from enchantment. He also dreamt that by means of it he recovered his Jorinda. In the morning, when he awoke, he began to seek over hill and dale for such a flower. He sought until the 9th day, and then, early in the morning, he found the blood-red flower. In the middle of it there was a large dewdrop, as big as the finest pearl. Day and night he journeyed with this flower to the castle. When he was within 100 paces of it, he was not held fast, but walked straight to the door. Joringel was full of joy. He touched the door with the flower, and it sprang open. He walked in through the courtyard and listened for the sound of the birds. At last he heard it. He went on and found the room from whence it came, and there the witch was feeding the birds in the 7,000 cages. When she saw Joringel, she was angry, very angry, and scolded and spat poison and gall at him, but she could not come within 2 paces of him. He did not take any notice of her, but went and looked at the cages with the birds. But there were many hundred nightingales. How was he to find his Jorinda again? Just then, he saw the old woman quietly take away a cage with a bird in it and go towards the door. Swiftly he sprang towards her, touched the cage with the flower, and also the old woman. She could now no longer bewitch anyone, and Jorinda was standing there, clasping him round the neck, and she was as beautiful as ever. Then all the other birds were turned into maidens again, and he went home with his Jorinda, and they lived happily together for a long time. The Wolf and the Man. Once upon a time, the fox was talking to the wolf of the strength of men, how no animal could withstand him, and how all were obliged to employ cunning in order to protect themselves from him. Then the wolf answered,
"If I had but one chance of seeing a man, I would set on him notwithstanding." "I can help you do that," said the fox. "Come to me early tomorrow morning, and I will show you one."
The wolf presented himself betimes, and the fox took him out on the road by which the huntsman went daily. First came an old discharged soldier.
"Is that a man?" inquired the wolf. "No," answered the fox, "that was one."
Afterwards came a little boy who was going to school.
"Is that a man?" "No, that will be one."
At length came a hunter with his double-barreled gun at his back and hanger by his side. Said the fox to the wolf,
"Look, there comes a man. You must attack him, but I will take myself off to my hole."
The wolf then rushed at the man. When the huntsman saw him, he said, "It's a pity that I have not loaded with a bullet," aimed and fired his small shot in his face. The wolf pulled a very wry grimace, but did not let himself be frightened, and he attacked him again, on which the huntsman gave him the second barrel. The wolf swallowed his pain and rushed on the huntsman, but he drew out his bright hanger, and he gave him a few cuts with it, right and left, so that bleeding everywhere, he ran howling back to the fox.
"Well, brother wolf," said the fox, "how have you got on with man?" "Ah," replied the wolf, "I never imagined the strength of man to be what it is. First, he took a stick from his shoulder, and he blew into it, and then something flew into my face which tickled me terribly. Then he breathed once more into the stick, and it flew into my nose like lightning and hail. When I was quite close, he drew a white rib out of his body, and he beat me so with it that I was all but left lying dead." "See what a braggart you are," said the fox. "You throw your hatchet so far that you cannot fetch it back again."
The Fox and the Cat. It happened that the cat met the fox in a forest, and as she thought to herself,
"He is clever and full of experience, and much esteemed in the world,"
she spoke to him in a friendly way.
"Good day, Mr. Fox. How is all with you? How are you getting on in these hard times?"
The fox, full of all kinds of arrogance, looked at the cat from head to foot for a long time, and did not know whether he would give any answer or not. At last he said,
"Oh, you wretched beard cleaner, you piebald fool, you hungry mouse catcher, what can you be thinking of? Have you the cheek to ask how I am getting on? What have you learned? How many arts do you understand?" "I understand but one," replied the cat modestly. "What art is that?" asked the fox. "When the hounds are following me, I can spring into a tree and save myself." "Is that all?" said the fox. "I am the master of 100 arts, and have into the bargain a sack full of cunning. You make me sorry for you. Come with me. I will teach you how people get away from the hounds."
Just then came a hunter with 4 dogs. The cat sprang nimbly up a tree and sat down on top of it, where the branches and foliage quite concealed her.
"Open your sack, Mr. Fox! Open your sack!"
cried the cat to him, but the dogs had already seized him and were holding him fast.
"Ah, Mr. Fox!"
cried the cat.
"You, with your 100 hearts, are left in a lurch. Had you been able to climb like me, you would have not lost your life."
Clever Gretel. There was once a cook named Gretel who wore shoes with red heels, and when she walked out with them on, she turned herself this way and that, was quite happy, and thought, "You certainly are a pretty girl." And when she came home, she drank, in her gladness of heart, a draught of wine, and as wine excites a desire to eat, she tasted the best of whatever she was cooking until she was satisfied, and said,
"The cook must know what the food is like."
It came to pass that the master one day said to her, "Gretel, there's a guest coming this evening. Prepare me 2 fowls very daintily."
"I will see to it, master,"
answered Gretel. She killed 2 fowls, scalded them, plucked them, put them on the spit, and towards evening set them before the fire, that they might roast. The fowls began to turn brown, and were nearly ready, but the guests had not yet arrived. Then Gretel called out to her master,
"If the guest does not come, I must take the fowls away from the fire, but it will be a sin and a shame if they are not eaten the moment they are at their juiciest."
The master said, "I will run myself and fetch the guest." When the master had turned his back, Gretel laid the spit with the fowls on one side and thought,
"Standing so long by the fire there makes one sweaty and thirsty. Who knows when the guest will come? Meanwhile, I will run into the cellar and take a drink. Yes."
She ran down, set a jug, said,
"God bless it for you, Gretel,"
and took a good drink, and then thought that the wine should flow on, and should not be interrupted, and took yet another hearty draught. Then she went and put the fowls down again to the fire, basted them, and drove the spit merrily around. But as the roast meat smelt so good, Gretel thought,
"Something must be wrong. It ought to be tasted."
She touched it with her finger and said,
"Ah, how good fowls are! It certainly is a sin and a shame that they are not eaten at the right time."
She ran to the window to see if the master was not coming with his guest, but she saw no one, and went back to the fowls and thought,
"One of the wings is burning. I had better take it off and eat it."
So she cut it off, ate it, and enjoyed it, and when she had done, she thought,
"The other must go down too, or else master will observe that something is missing."
When the 2 wings were eaten, she went and looked for her master, and did not see him. It suddenly occurred to her that they might not be coming at all, and may have turned in somewhere. Then she said,
"Well, Gretel, enjoy yourself. 1 fowl has been cut in 2. Take another drink, and eat it up entirely. When it's eaten, you will have some peace. Why should God's good gifts be spoiled?"
So she ran to the cellar again, took an enormous drink, and ate up the 1 chicken in great glee. When one of the chickens was swallowed down, and still her master did not come, Gretel looked down at the other and said,
"Where one is, the other should be likewise. The 2 go together. What's right for the one is right for the other. I think if I were to take another draught, it would do me no harm."
So she took yet another hearty drink, and let the second chicken follow the first. While she was making the most of it, her master came and cried, "Hurry up, Gretel! The guest is coming directly after me."
"Yes, sir, I will soon serve up,"
answered Gretel. Meantime, the master looked to see that the table was properly laid, and took the great knife wherewith he was going to carve the chickens, and sharpened it on the steps.
Presently, the guest came and knocked politely and courteously at the house door. Gretel ran and looked to see who was there, and when she saw the guest, she put her finger to her lips and said,
"Hush, hush, go away as quickly as you can. If my master catches you, it will be the worse for you. He certainly did ask you to supper, but his intention is to cut off your 2 ears. Just listen how he is sharpening the knife for it."
The guest heard the sharpening, and they hurried down the steps again as fast as they could. Gretel was not idle. She ran screaming to her master and cried,
"You have invited a fine guest."
"Why, Gretel, what do you mean by that?"
"Yes," said she, "he has taken the chickens which I was just going to serve off the dish and has run away with them."
"That's a nice trick," said her master, and lamented the fine chickens. "If only he had left me but one so that something remained for me to eat."
He called for him to stop, but the guest pretended not to hear. Then he ran after him with the knife still in his hand, crying,
"Just one! Just one!"
meaning that the guest should leave him just one chicken and not take both. The guest, however, thought no otherwise than that he was to give up just one of his ears, and ran as if a fire were burning under him, in order to take both of his ears home with him. The Wolf and the Fox. The wolf had the little fox with him, and whatsoever the wolf wished, the fox was compelled to do, for he was the weaker, and he would gladly have been rid of his master. It chanced that once they were going through the forest, the wolf said,
"Red Fox, get me something to eat, or else I will eat you yourself."
Then the fox answered,
"I know a farm where there are 2 young lambs. If you are inclined, we will fetch one of them."
That suited the wolf, and they went thither, and the fox stole the little lamb, took it to the wolf, and went away. The wolf devoured it, but he was not satisfied with one. He wanted the other as well, and went to get it. But as he did it so clumsily, the mother of the little lamb heard him, and began to cry out terribly, and to bleat so that the farmers came running there. They found the wolf and beat him so mercilessly that he went to the fox limping and howling.
"You have misled me finely," said he. "I wanted to fetch the other lamb, and the country folks surprised me and have beaten me to a jelly."
The fox replied,
"Why are you such a glutton?"
Next day they went again into the country, and the greedy wolf once more said,
"Red Fox, get me something to eat, or I will eat you yourself."
Then answered the fox,
"I know a farmhouse where the wife is baking pancakes tonight. We will get some of them for ourselves."
They went there, and the fox slipped around the house, and peeped and sniffed about until he discovered where the dish was, and then snatched 6 pancakes and carried them to the wolf.
"There is something for you to eat,"
said he to him, and then went his way. The wolf swallowed down the pancakes in an instant and said,
"They make me want more."
And he went thither and tore the whole dish down so that it broke into pieces. This made such a great noise that the woman came out, and when she saw the wolf, she called the people who hurried there, and beat him as long as their sticks would hold together, till with 2 lame legs, and howling badly, he returned to the fox in the forest.
"How abominably you have misled me," cried he. "The peasants caught me and tanned my skin for me."
But the fox replied,
"Why are you such a glutton?"
On the 3rd day, when they were out together, and the wolf could only limp along painfully, he again said,
"Red Fox, get me something to eat, or I will eat you yourself."
The fox answered,
"I know a man who has been killing, and the salted meat is lying in a barrel in the cellar. We will get that."
Said the wolf,
I will go when you do, that you may help me if I am not able to get away."
"I am willing," said the fox, and showed him the bypaths and ways by which at length they reached the cellar. There was meat in abundance, and the wolf attacked it instantly and thought,
"There is plenty of time before I need leave off."
The fox liked it also, but looked about everywhere, and often ran to the hole by which it had come in, to find out if his body was still thin enough to slip through it. The wolf said,
"Dear fox, tell me why you are running here and there so much, and jumping in and out."
"I must see that no one is coming," replied the crafty fellow. "Don't eat too much." Then said the wolf,
"I shall not leave until the barrel is empty."
In the meantime, the farmer, who had heard the noise of the fox's jumping, came into the cellar. When the fox saw him, he was out of the hole at one bound. The wolf wanted to follow him, but he had made himself so fat with eating that he could no longer get through, but was stuck fast. Then came the farmer with a cudgel and struck him dead, but the fox bounded into the forest, glad to be rid of the old glutton. The Death of the Little Hen. Once upon a time, the little hen went with the little cock to the nut hill, and they agreed together that whichsoever of them found a kernel of a nut should share it with the other. Then the hen found a large nut, but said nothing about it, intending to eat the kernel herself. The kernel, however, was so large that she could not swallow it, and it remained sticking in her throat, so that she was alarmed lest she should be choked. Then she cried,
"Cock, I entreat you to run as fast as you can and fetch me some water, or I shall choke."
The little cock did run as fast as he could to the spring, and said,
"Stream, you ought to give me some water. The little hen is lying on the nut hill, and she has swallowed a large nut, and is choking."
The well answered, "First run to the bride, and get her to give you some red silk." The little cock ran to the bride and said,
"Bride, you ought to give me some red silk. I want to give red silk to the well. The well is to give me some water. I am to take the water to the little hen who is lying on the nut hill and has swallowed a great nut kernel and is choking with it."
The bride answered,
"First, run and bring me my little wreath which is hanging to a willow."
So the little cock ran to the willow and drew the wreath from the branch and took it to the bride, and the bride gave him some red silk for it, which he then took to the well, who gave him some water for that. Then the little cock took the water to the hen, but when he got there, the hen had choked in the meantime, and lay there dead, and did not move. Then the cock was so distressed that he cried aloud, and every animal came to lament the little hen, and 6 mice built a little carriage to carry her to her grave, and when the carriage was ready, they harnessed themselves to it, and the cock drove. On the way, however, they met the fox, who said,
"Where are you going, little cock?"
"I'm going to bury my little hen."
"May I drive with you?" said the fox.
"Yes, but seat yourself at the back of the carriage, for in the front my little horses could not drag you." Then a procession went onwards, and they reached a stream. "How are we to cross over?" said the little cock. A straw was lying by the stream, and it said,
"I will lay myself straight across, and then you can drive over me."
But when the 6 mice came to the bridge, the straw slipped and fell into the water, and the 6 mice all fell in and were drowned. Then they were again in more difficulty, and a coal came and said,
"I am large enough. I will lay myself across, and you shall drive over me."
So the coal also laid itself across the water, but unhappily just touched the water, at which the coal hissed, was extinguished, and died. When a stone saw that, it took pity on the little cock, wished to help him, and laid itself over the water.
Then the cock drew the carriage himself, but when he got it over and reached the shore with the dead hen, and was about to draw over the others who were sitting behind as well, there were too many of them. The carriage ran back, and they all fell into the water together, and they were all drowned. Then the little cock was left alone with the dead hen, and dug a grave for her, and laid her in it, and made a mound above it, on which he sat down and fretted until he died too, and then everyone was dead. Gambling Hansel. Once upon a time there was a man who did nothing but gamble, and for that reason people never called him anything but Gambling Hansel, and as he never ceased to gamble, he played away his house and all that he had. Now, that very day before his creditors were to take his house from him, came the Lord and St. Peter and asked him to give them shelter for the night. Then Gambling Hansel said, "For my part, you may stay the night, but I cannot give you a bed or anything to eat." So the Lord said he was just to take them in, and they themselves would buy something to eat, to which Gambling Hansel made no objection. Thereupon St. Peter gave him 3 groschen, and said he was to go to the baker's and fetch some bread. So Gambling Hansel went, but when he reached the house where the other gambling vagabonds were gathered together, they, although they had won all that he had, greeted him clamorously and said, "Hansel, do come in." "No," said he, "do you want to win 3 groschen too?" On this they would not let him go. So he went in, and he played away the 3 groschen also. Meanwhile, St. Peter and the Lord were waiting, and as he was so long in coming, they set out to meet him. When Gambling Hansel came, however, he pretended that the money had fallen into the gutter, and kept raking about in it all the while to find it, but our Lord already knew that he had lost it in play. St. Peter again gave him 3 more groschen, and he did not allow himself to be led away once more, but fetched them the loaf. Our Lord then inquired if he had no wine, and he said, "Alack, sir, the casks are all empty." But the Lord said he was to go down into the cellar, for the best wine was still there. For a long time he would not believe this, but at length he said, "Well, I will go down, but I know that there is none there." When he turned the tap, however, lo and behold, the best of the wine ran out. So he took it to them, and the 2 passed the night there. Early next day, our Lord told Gambling Hansel that he might beg 3 favors. The Lord expected that he would ask to go to heaven, but Gambling Hansel asked for a pack of cards for which he could win everything, for dice with which he could win everything, and for a tree wherein every kind of fruit would grow, and from which no one who had climbed up could descend until he bade him to do so. The Lord gave him all that he had asked, and departed with St. Peter. And now Gambling Hansel at once set about gambling in real earnest, and before long he had gained half the world. Upon this St. Peter said to the Lord, "Lord, this thing must not go on. At last he will win the whole world. We must send death to him." And they did. They sent death to him. When death appeared, Gambling Hansel had just seated himself at the gaming table, and death said, "Hansel, come out a while." But Gambling Hansel said, "Just wait a little until the game is done, and in the meantime get up into that tree out there, and gather a little fruit that we may have something to munch on our way." Thereupon Death climbed up, and he wanted to come down again, but he could not, and Gambling Hansel left him up there for 7 years, during which time no one died. So St. Peter said to the Lord, "Lord, this thing must not go on. People no longer die. We must go ourselves." And they went themselves, and the Lord commanded Hansel to let death come down. So Hansel went at once to death and said to him, "Come down." And together they came to the next world, and then Gambling Hansel made straight for the door of heaven and knocked at it. "Who is there?" "Gambling Hansel." "Ah,
We will have nothing to do with him. Be gone!"
At that, Gambling Hansel went to the door of purgatory, and he knocked once more.
"Who is there?" "Gambling Hansel." "Ah, there's quite enough weeping and wailing here without him. We do not want to gamble. Just go away."
Then he went to the door of hell, and there they let him in. There was, however, no one at home but old Lucifer and the crooked devils. The straight ones were just busy in the world. And no sooner was Hansel there than he had sat down to gamble again. Lucifer, however, had nothing to lose but his misshapen devils, and Gambling Hansel won them from him, as with his cards he could not fail to do. And now he was off again with his crooked devils, and they went to Hoffenfurt and pulled up a hop pole, and with it went to heaven and began to thrust the pole against it, and heaven began to crack. So again St. Peter said,
"Lord, this thing cannot go on. We must let him in, or he will overthrow the whole of heaven."
And they let him in. But Gambling Hansel immediately began to play again, and there was such a noise and confusion that there was no hearing what they themselves were saying. Therefore St. Peter once more said,
"Lord, this cannot go on. We must throw him down, or he will make all of heaven rebellious."
So they went to him at once, and threw him down, and his soul broke into fragments, and went into the gambling vagabonds, who are living this very day. The Fox and the Geese. The fox once came to a meadow in which sat a flock of fine fat geese, on which he smiled and said,
"I come in the nick of time. You are sitting together quite beautifully, so that I can eat you up one after the other."
The geese cackled with terror, sprang up, and began to wail and beg piteously for their lives. But the fox would listen to nothing and said,
"There is no mercy to be had. You must die."
At length one of them took heart and said,
"If we poor geese are to yield up our lives, show us the only possible favor, and allow us one more prayer, that we may not die in our sins, and then we will place ourselves in a row, so that you can always pick yourself out the fattest."
"Yes," said the fox, "that is reasonable, and a pious request. Pray away. I will wait until you are done."
Then the first began a good long prayer, forever saying,
"Ga, ga, ga."
and as she would make no end, the second did not wait until her turn came, but also began,
"Ga, ga, ga."
The third and fourth followed her, and soon they were all cackling together. When they have done praying, the story shall be continued further, but at present they are still praying unceasingly. The Poor Man and the Rich Man. In olden times, when the Lord himself still used to walk about on this earth amongst men, it once happened that he was tired and overtaken by the darkness before he could reach an inn. Now there stood on the road before him 2 houses facing each other, the one large and beautiful, and the other small and poor. The large one belonged to a rich man, and the small one to a poor man. Then the Lord thought, "I shall be no burden to a rich man. I will stay the night with him." Then the rich man heard someone knocking at his door. He opened the window and asked the stranger what he wanted. The Lord answered,
"I only ask for a night's lodging."
Then the rich man looked at the traveler from head to foot, and as the Lord was wearing common clothes and did not look like one who had much money in his pocket, he shook his head, and he said, "No, I cannot take you in. My rooms are full of herbs and seeds.
and if I were to lodge everyone who knocked at my door, I might very soon go begging myself. Go somewhere else for a lodging."
And with this, he shut down the window and left the Lord standing there. So the Lord turned his back on the rich man, and he went across to the small house and knocked. He had hardly done so when the poor man opened the little door and bade the traveler to come in.
"Pass the night with me. It's already dark," said he. "You cannot go any further tonight."
This pleased the Lord, and he went in. The poor man's wife shook hands with him and welcomed him, and said he was to make himself at home and to put up with what they had got. They had not much to offer him, but what they had they would give him with all of their hearts. The wife then put the potatoes on the fire, and while they were boiling, she milked the goat, that they might have a little bit of milk with the potatoes. When the cloth was laid, the Lord sat down with the man and his wife, and he enjoyed their coarse food, for there were happy faces at the table. When they had had supper and it was bedtime, the woman called her husband apart and said,
"Listen, dear husband, let us make up a bed of straw for ourselves tonight, and then the poor traveler can sleep in our bed and have a good rest, for he has been walking a whole day through, and that can make one very weary."
"With all my heart," he answered. "I will go and offer it to him."
And he went to the stranger and invited him, if he had no objection, to sleep in their bed and rest his limbs properly. But the Lord was unwilling to take their bed from the two old folks. However, they would not be satisfied until at length he did it and lay down in their bed, while they themselves lay on some straw on the ground. The next morning they got up before daybreak and made as good of a breakfast as they could for the guest. When the sun shone in through the little window and the Lord had gotten up, he again ate with them and then prepared to set out on his journey. But as he was standing at the door, he turned around and said,
"As you are so kind and good, you may wish 3 things for yourselves, and I will grant them."
Then the man said,
"What else should I wish for but eternal happiness, and that we too, as long as we live, may be healthy and have every day our daily bread? For the 3rd wish, I do not know what to have."
And the Lord said to him,
"Will you wish for a new house instead of this old one?" "Oh, yes," said the man. "If I can have that too, I should like it very much."
And the Lord fulfilled his wish, and changed their old house into a new one, again gave them his blessing, and went on. The sun was high when the rich man got up and leaned out of his window and saw, on the opposite side of the way, a new, clean-looking house with red tiles and bright windows where the old hut used to sit. He was very much astonished and called his wife and said to her,
"Tell me, what can have happened? Last night there was a miserable little hut standing there, and today there's a beautiful new house. Run over and see how that has come to pass."
So his wife went and asked the poor man, and he said to her,
"Yesterday evening a traveler came here and asked for a night's lodging, and this morning, when he took leave of us, he granted us 3 wishes. We wished for eternal happiness, health during this life, and our daily bread as well, and besides this, a beautiful new house instead of our old hut."
When the rich man's wife heard this, she ran back in haste and told her husband how it had happened. The man said,
"I could tear myself to pieces if I had but known that. That traveler came to our house too, and he wanted to sleep here, and I sent him away."
"Quickly,"
said his wife,
"get on your horse. You can still catch the man up, and then you must ask to have 3 wishes granted to you also."
The rich man followed the good counsel and galloped away on his horse, and soon he came up with the Lord. He spoke to him softly and pleasantly, and begged him not to take it amiss that he had not let him in directly. He said that he was looking for the front door key, and in the meantime the stranger had gone away. If he returned the same way, he must come back and stay with him.
"Yes,"
said the Lord,
"if I ever come back again, I will do so."
Then the rich man asked if he might not wish for 3 things too, as his neighbor had done.
"Yes,"
said the Lord, that he might, but it would not be to his advantage, and that he had better not wish for anything. But the rich man thought that he could easily ask for something which would add to his happiness, if he only knew that it would be granted. So the Lord said to him,
"Ride home then, and 3 wishes which you shall make shall be fulfilled."
The rich man had now gained what he had wanted, so he rode home and began to consider what he should wish for. As he was thus thinking, he let the bridle fall, and the horse began to caper about, so that he was continually disturbed in his meditations, and could not collect his thoughts at all. He patted the horse's neck and said gently, "Lisa," but the horse only began new tricks. Then at last the man became angry, and he cried quite impatiently, "I wish that your neck was broken." Directly he had said the words, down the horse fell on the ground, and there it lay, dead, and never moved again. And thus was his first wish fulfilled. As he was miserly by nature, he did not like to leave the harness lying there, so he cut it off and put it on his back, and now he had to go on foot.
"I still have 2 wishes left,"
said he, and he comforted himself with that thought. And now, as he was walking slowly through the sand, and the sun was burning hot at noonday, he grew quite bad-tempered and angry. The saddle hurt his back, you see, and he had not any idea yet what to wish for.
"If I were to wish for all the riches and treasures in the world," said he to himself, "I should still to think of all kinds of other things later on. I know that beforehand, but I'll manage so that there's nothing at all left to me to wish for afterwards."
Then he sighed and said,
"Ah, if I were but that Bavarian peasant who likewise had 3 wishes granted to him, and knew quite well what to do, and in the first place wished for a great deal of beer, and in the second for as much beer as he was able to drink, and in the third for a barrel of beer into the bargain."
Many a time he had thought he had found it, but then it seemed to him to be, after all, far too little. Then it came into his mind what an easy life his wife had, for she stayed at home in a cool room and enjoyed herself. This really did begin to vex him, and before he was aware, he said,
"I just wish she was sitting there on this saddle and could not get off of it, instead of my having to drag it along my back."
And as the last word was spoken, the saddle disappeared from his back, and he saw that his second wish had been fulfilled. Then he really did feel hot. He began to run and wanted to be quite alone in his room at home, to think of something really big for his last wish. But when he arrived there and opened the parlor door, he saw his wife sitting in the middle of the room on the saddle, crying and complaining, and quite unable to get off of it.
So he said, "Do bear it, and I will wish for all the riches on earth for you, only stay where you are."
She, however, called him a fool and said,
"What good will all the riches on earth do me if I am to sit on this saddle? You have wished me on it, so you must help me off."
So whether he would or not, he was forced to let his third wish be that she would be quit of the saddle and able to get off of it, and immediately the wish was fulfilled. So the man got nothing by it but vexation, trouble, abuse, and the loss of his horse. But the poor people lived contentedly, quietly and piously, until their happy deaths. Thank you again for coming around and listening to the stories with us. Once again, Happy New Year's to each and every one of you. Let's see what 2024 can bring to us all. Until next time, sweet dreams.